What's up, y'all, and welcome back to the Michael Experience Podcast. I am your orator and originator, Michael, and these are my thoughts, my life, my way. So, I had a conversation recently with a gentleman, and I found myself kind of lost in the conversation. And that's particularly hard for me because I usually can decipher context and preface and pretext. I usually can do a good job of finding my way through what it is that a person is trying to say. But I found myself listening to a conversation, trying to understand what was the point. And to add some context for you all, it's a situation where you meet somebody new. And so there is a level of just getting to know somebody that you have to do in order to get comfortable. And I always say that as I move through relationships of any kind, as I move into those relationships moving forward, I need to understand how people think and how people feel. And I don't say, I'm not talking about just like in the moment feeling, but like how do people really feel their way through the world? How do their emotions guide their actions and their responses to certain things? And so, with that being said, with that being kind of a mantra as I introduce myself into new situations, I think it's very important to talk about the level of openness that you have to have in order to cultivate new relationships, whatever those may be. And so I found myself in a conversation where I was like, I do not understand how these conversations and these topics are being introduced. And moreover, how are we navigating these conversations in a way that there's meaning and there's impact at the end of it? And for those of you out there like, Michael, I'm lost. Well, I'm just as lost in this conversation. But what I will say is, like, I find that some people are so eager to just talk and say things that they just word vomit without any real direction or any real goal at the end of the conversation. And I hate the kind of conversations where the topic is introduced and you start, going down, the bullet points, or you go down the chain of thoughts in that, and the other person takes the conversation completely left field, so much so that you either have to interject at some point and say the original point is so far gone, or I don't want the original point to be so far gone that we need to take a moment to understand where we started and kind of how we got here. I say this is so important in any type of relationships, but I think particularly in dating, you have to be willing to walk into the situation with a level of openness. And in a romantic sense, I'm always reminded of something that I've long felt and that Craig the Writer Stewart has put words to, and that is relationships are the place where people go to learn and grow. And I keep that in, top of mind as I'm navigating with a new person, just in general, but particularly in my singledom. I keep that at the top of mind because it is one thing to say, I'm ready and I'm willing and I want to be loved and I want to give love and I have a lot to give. It's one thing to gauge your readiness on that and maybe even sometimes your willingness, but how accurate is that? How accurate is that? And then I had this thought pop into my head about how many people have learned how to learn and how many people have figured out how to grow. Because I think the words have meaning. And I think in a basic sense, we know what that means. But what does learning look and feel like in you, whatever relationship you're having? What does that look like? You have to be willing to learn first so that you can grow. And then you have to understand that growth isn't something that just happens, it is something that you work towards, also requiring you to be open. And I hate to put one before the other, but that's how sentences are formed. But I mean, learning and growing should be, they're right there. They're kind of like the conjoined twins of progress when it comes to relationships. But I'm learning that even though we know what Webster says it is, in action, we don't know how to practice learning and growing. And so I say that because openness in a conversation will have you ready to challenge all of your norms, or some of your norms, should I say, but should be challenging all of them and questioning if they still apply at this point in your life. And you should be challenging whatever you felt coming into a new situation. You should challenge if there is something from your past life that creeps in. Is there something that you might project onto the person? Is there an undertone to maybe how you address situations that maybe can make someone feel untoward? You have to do some level of work in an effort to be truly open and willing to learn. And in this conversation that I had, I realized that this person was saying that they were ready and saying, I want to know who you are and I want to know your heart and I want to know your mind, but their actions weren't in alignment. And my first recourse to something like that isn't to be combative or isn't to be defensive. It is to uncover, it is to reveal in effort that it can be at least evaluated, right, in a meaningful way. And whether you decide that it's a problem worth fixing or not, at least it's on the table and you've had the opportunity and we've given each other the space to say, hey, I looked at it and it's a no, or hey, I looked at it and you're right, I want to move forward. That is what that openness and willingness feels and looks like. What it shouldn't look like is a constant trying to explain over and explain around it and doing this contrary, contradicting thing where it's like, well, I know I said this, but this is what I actually mean. And well, this is what I mean now, but I know what I said earlier. Absolutely not. Like, we have to be clear on things at some point, and we can't keep trying to go back and forth when we feel like it's convenient. You have to take ownership sometimes so that you are not talking around in circles. And this situation really made me realize that that has happened probably several times over in my life. And maybe I don't know if I've called it out every time, but one of the things moving forward that I've been committed to doing is creating the space for me to be challenged on things that I might not be able to see, and also creating the space for the other person, all in the name of growth and not judgment, not, trying to assign blame. That doesn't do anybody any good. And in a space where you truly don't know each other, and the goal is that you try to get to know why people and inform yourself on why people are the way they are and how they move the way that they move. You have to be willing to concede some ideas and some notions about what that looks like and how it comes off. And so I noticed that this person was just a contrarian, or seemed to be a contrarian, excuse me. And I wanted to introduce to the conversation that point, because it's important to me, like, did you know that that is how you come off? Is that something that someone has said to you before, or in some way, shape, or form? Has anybody ever told you that? And I had that conversation, and as I would have expected, the over explanation started coming. And even though being defensive doesn't always mean being aggressive or being mean or being loud, right? Being defensive is nothing more than just trying to argue a point against something, however that looks. And arguments are not always bad, they're just a difference of thoughts, opinions, and ideologies. And so I want to take away the negative context away from the word argument, and just put it into to terms of differences. And so I wanted to make him aware because I wanted him to be able to absorb what I was telling him and see if he could, kind of go back in his repertoire and think of a time somebody told him, like, yo, you're argumentative. Or, yo, why you always feel like you got to over explain stuff when people ask you this, or whatever that may be. And so initially, he wanted to be a little bit defensive, argumentative, however we want to look at that. And I said, Steve, I said, let me just say this. My hope is that sometimes instead of listening and already forming what you want to say in defense of whatever you've got going on, I really just wish that you would sit with it and process it and then come back so it doesn't feel like we're having this back and forth exchange all the time. Because my hope is that this is something that either you're hearing for the first time and you are willing to look at it and work through it, or if it's something you've been told before that you've not decided, like, I already know that and I just don't give a damn. Because if that's the case, by all means, you don't care, you don't want to change it, great. But that also means that it may not be something that I can live with. And there's nothing right or wrong about that. You know what I mean? You be who you are. If it's not worth changing to you, then by all means, go ahead and move. We can move, in our separate directions. But you have to be willing to at least sit with something that somebody that you are saying you want to get to know, you want deeper connection with, a connection at all, you want to create something meaningful with. You have to give people an opportunity to express. You also have to give people an opportunity to just say, listen, I this is room for me to grow, and this is exactly what I came here to do. But if you close yourself off immediately and you become defensive and you have a good reason for everything that you do, good intentions do not always lead to good outcomes. And what you might think in your mind is happening or is being perceived may not be it. And you are going to have a level of openness to be able to see, experience, and hear it from the other person's perspective, if that's someone you want to get to know. Now, if you don't really want to get to know and you're just passing time, then, well, I mean, what are we doing here? But I think it's very important that when things do come up, that you address them, and you address them in real time, and you address them in a way that is productive and not trying to be accusatory or not trying to be on 10 with somebody, because that's not conducive to the learning process, and it's surely not conducive to singular growth, but also your growth as a couple or a unit or whatever it is that you are working towards. And so I definitely had to just say, I hope that you will sit with this and then just kind of go through, maybe your archive of things and see if it's something you've been told before. And if you realize that it is, that you come back and say to me, listen, this is something that I actually do want to work on for me. Because if you work on it for the other person, it really doesn't do you any justice. That's not a point of growth. Like, you're just performing. It should be something that you want to work through for you, And then in turn, it just does something or adds value to the both of you at some point. But I'm very big on, I don't want you to say something to appease me. And I don't want you to apologize or say sorry, excuse me, say sorry for something and you don't realize what you are saying sorry for. Because again, that is not, conducive to learning and growing. So I like to address things, call them out, decide where we're going to go with it. Some stuff is not a big issue, and it in the inception or in the incitement of some of these conversations, they're not that important. But what is more important is the mentality behind it and why it keeps happening, why these smaller things turn into these larger discussion, larger, Lord, words are hard, larger discussions, and they turn into these points of dissension and disconnection where you're saying you want to be a part of something bigger. One of the things that I always tell people that I'm dating is like, I want to be held accountable. I want to be held accountable. If there is ever something that is a peeve, or if there is ever something that just does not feel good in the situation, please tell me. And when I say that, I am 100% ready in the moment to do some reflection and to also say sometimes, wow, I need to sit with this. There have been several times in conversations where I will say, you know what? This is a lot of information and I just need to sit with it. And there's nothing wrong with taking time to sit with it. And people that are on the same wavelength and people that understand that change does require, well, change requires change. And when you're going through a change, there is a process, there is a transitional process that happens mentally, physically, emotionally. There is something because we go through the stages of realizing things in life, and sometimes, like as we say, you don't know until you know. And then you have to challenge yourself to break old habits, and then you have to, in your mind, make associations that make sense so that you can then say, okay, when this happens, I need to be more self-aware, I need to be more conscious of how I act in these situations. But those are the learning points, and the action that comes from it, the reaction could be to the progress on the other side of it, is the growth that continues to happen. It's so beneficial in relationships, especially new relationships, that everyone has the space to say, I got questions about this, or hey, I noticed something and I wanted to bring it to your attention, or hey, have you thought about doing something different? You have to create that space. It is imperative for everyone's mental in the relationship or whatever, romantic or otherwise. It is very important that everyone has that space to grow. And what we know about growth is that sometimes there are some bumps and bruises along the way, right? There's some scuffles in there, not in a physical way, but there's some scuffles in there. You might get a knee scrape or elbow scrape or something or another, not in a physical way. I'm just kind of giving, some alliteration to what it looks like when you stumble through the process and you're figuring it out. But the beauty in that is, if you are working towards the same thing, you both tend to the scrapes and the bruises, and you begin to be each other's support system throughout. And you feel in turn safer. You feel like someone truly has your back. You feel like if you are out of pocket, you have that person that is going to help you recenter, and ultimately, is going to provide you peace, because you know that the space that is created was all about love, and it was all about the space for whatever you guys you have, ladies, gentlemen, they, them, are building, is about love, unity, and growth. But you have to be willing. And so in the example that I gave, to me, that shows up as a red flag initially. It shows up as a red flag initially. However, I'm very big on, if you show up, I will show up too. And I've said before in conversations, I know that when it comes to men, and particularly black men, there is a bit of emotional navigation that has to happen in order to get to that elevated emotional quotient, that EQ, that emotional intelligence, as we like to call it. That there's some navigating that we're going to have to do. And as somebody who, I don't want to say I've mastered it, but I've gotten damn good at it, recognizing it, engaging in it, talking about it, talking through it. As somebody that has a more than average level of emotional intelligence, I find it important to do what I feel like I do across any skill set that I have in any a relationship, form of communication or exchange, is that each one reach one, each one teach one. And I feel like if we continue to share the resources, especially those that, can somehow free up and liberate our mental capabilities, I think we should do it. And so I don't look at it as a hindrance when I'm dating my man or my black man, particularly. I don't see it as a hindrance necessarily. Is it a point of friction? Sure. But I'm here to remove that point of friction if I can. And so I say, if you show up, I'm going to show up. When you stop showing up, I stop showing up. And that is it at the end of the day. And as I've said before, from my girl Iyanla Van Zant, I am not going to fight you for your healing. But I wanted to make sure that this was a conversation that I put out there, because I think so many times the moment we have a discussion that doesn't immediately go our way or doesn't immediately feel good, it's like, you know what, I'm walking away. I'm walking away. This was too difficult. This gave me a little bit of a headache. I had to think a little bit outside of the box on this one, and I shouldn't have to, because it should just be perfect. I'm walking away. You can't keep walking away from everything. Everything in life, every person in life is going to give you something. You just have to find the right person to engage in the journey with and to do the walking for and with and to. That you keep on walking, you keep on running, you're going to run out of space. And so it's best that you create the world in which you want to live in, romantically or whatever relationships you find yourself engaging in. And so that is my that is one of my points of getting to know somebody, is that there is going to be a learning curve. There are going to be some rocky moments in there. I come to expect them, if I'm being honest. I come to expect them because what I think we do as people, and this is what they call that representative, what I think we do as people is show up in the beginning, and we only want people to see the best of us, and we exaggerate that sometimes, we put 20 on 10, or is that the same? Anyway, we put more on it than we need to. I don't know. I don't know how that 20 on 10 works. I need to Google that. However, I think we want to show ourselves in the best light possible. And sometimes it's not with, malfeasance, malicious intent. It's not, trying in a lot of cases to be deceptive. It's just that we want to be seen at our best. You know what I mean? We want to be seen at our best, and we think that if we show up, as who we are, that might be, a deciding factor or a detractor in getting to be with the person that at this moment you foresee yourself wanting to be with. And I don't think there's anything wrong with wanting to put your best foot forward, but I also think what has to happen is that you have to pull the curtains back so that people can see what's behind door number two, what's behind, what lies beneath, because those things are just as important. And all of us as people have something that we need to work on, whether it is our listening capabilities, whether it is, you know, the way that we communicate, the language involved in communication, the way we resolve issues, the way that we view arguments, the way that we review arguments. You know, there are going to be disagreements, there are going to be back and forths, but if it's somebody worth it, you'll continue. You know, if you feel like that person is worth it and you know, you really have some type of feelings for that person, you'll continue those things. But hopefully, those disagreements, those arguments of sort, are not meant to tear each other down, but to figure a way across, to build a bridge across to one another so that you can go back and forth, you know, without the treachery of the journey, you know, without jumping off the deep end first. Hopefully, each and every disagreement and each and every argument places you all that much closer and within arm's reach of each other to know this is how I need to be loved. This is how I need to be nurtured. This is how I need to be inspired and motivated and supported. Hopefully, every disagreement is that, and every argument is that. My goal is always to see every side of the person that I'm dealing with. And I know that some people feel like, particularly men, black men, because that's the most of my experience. For those of you wondering why I keep saying that, I've not really spent a lot of time outside of that. So I have to give you the experiences that I have through my lens. But particularly black men find that to be a negative interaction when it happens. Oh, we're having arguments. Oh, I'm being challenged. And you should be challenged in meaningful and impactful ways. And no, every disagreement and every argument is not a bad thing. It is what you do after it, it's what you do with the information and the emotional output that you found through it. If you just think that you're arguing for no reason, or you think that you're back and forth because you guys are in a battle with each other, then what are you there for? You have to really question, what am I here for? What am I doing here? For me, it greatly humanizes us as people, as men, when we can just say, you know what, that actually did hurt my feelings. I'm not going to lie, that hurt my feelings. But when I sat with it and I figured out why it hurt my feelings, maybe it was tied to something deeper in your childhood. Maybe it was tied to a series of relationships, or maybe it was tied to one relationship where you just have a little bit of PTSD. It happens to the best of us that we have one situation, and just the smallest thing might make us recall or rethink about it. But then we have to come back to reality. And the reality is that we are all individuals. And in order to get to know a person for who they are, we can't go back and hold them to a comparison or a contrast of all of the negative attributes of the person you were with before. We can't do that. There are going to be good things that your past partners have done, some great things. There's also going to be some things that you would rather not have, you know, experienced. But you have to be willing to let all of that go when you decide to move forward, and allow the person that you are getting to know to be the person you are getting to know. I always tell men when I'm dating them in the beginning, I am not paying for what someone in your past did or did not do. And I think it sounds so simple when I put it out there, and it's a very short but powerful phrase. And I think sometimes the men are like, okay, like I get it, but you don't really get it. What it means is you're not going to continue to tell me, well, I have dealt with people before and this is how they treated me. And I dealt with this person. And so I'm just trying to make sure that that doesn't happen with you. And well, I just noticed that, you are different, but I just, I go back to, we're not going to keep doing that. That is exactly what I mean when I say I am not paying for something that somebody else did or did not do. If somebody challenged you and they did it just because that was a sport to them, that's not who I am. And I'm not going to be held to that. When you and I have a disagreement, my goal at the end of the day is to figure out how you and I can move forward together so that we don't have to have this particular disagreement again. And I don't want to I don't want to assign, excuse me, I don't want to assign blame or add a negative connotation to our conversation. It doesn't feel good for sure, right? We're both navigating a space that's unknown because we're trying to figure that part out. So I always try to remove the negative undertones and the negative connotations in these moments because truly my goal is to get to know you. My goal is to fully love you for everything that you are, everything you will become, everything that you have, and anything other than just trying to figure it out is counterproductive to the goal. I've had many conversations where did it get heated and did I feel like it was going there? And I had to say, whoa, 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 wait a minute. Wait a minute. Let me first let me just adjust my tone. I don't get in the rafters very often, but I'm like, let me just adjust my tone. Let me recenter this conversation to what it's really about. I'm here because I want to care. I want to get to know. And yeah, this moment does not feel good. However, I can see your frustration. I feel it. I don't want us to have this moment ever again. And I want you to know that my intention from the incitement of this was to whatever. It was to figure out why your mood was different, why your energy was off. It wasn't meant to be accusatory. It wasn't meant to be an indictment on your character. I truly just want to learn how to operate you and operate with you as we are getting to know each other. That's it. I'm not here to fight. I'm not here to make anybody's life any harder than it has to be. But we just got to figure this out if we're going to continue to be with each other. I do find that switching the tone in that way and recentering around what I believe our goals are as a potential couple or potential unit, I've noticed that that has always brought the level of angst down in a situation, and it's diffused in most instances the need to go back and forth and assert dominance and to be defensive. I think it truly bolsters that emotional capacity to just say, you know what, maybe I'm looking at this wrong and maybe I need to just step back and calm down a little bit. Maybe I'm on 10 and maybe I need to come down here on a 5 or 6. More often than not, I find that people who had good intentions as well and maybe they just didn't know the language or didn't, you know, quite know how to articulate it in a way that wasn't, catastrophic. I find that more often than not that has been an effective tool, and I've been able to have meaningful conversations come on the other side of it. And so when I talk about creating safe spaces, giving people the time after big conversations, and like I said, it's a mind shift, giving people the space and the time to just sit with it, just to sit with it. And maybe they come the next day, or maybe it's 2 days later, or some people it might take a little longer. It just depends how deep rooted their, habits and their, you know, alignment to the negative behavior. It just depends how woven and how deep that is. Some people have to go through a full lifetime to figure it out. Some people can say, you know what? I already know the relationship that turned me this way. I already know what it is. There are some people that have to go even further, and maybe they have a series of relationships. And I think what I've learned about a lot of us is that we're good at just picking up and moving on and sweeping under the rug and be like, okay, out of sight, out of mind. And then when we get with somebody that's like, you're not gonna sweep that under the rug. Go ahead on and clean that out now. That is very jarring. That is very jarring. And if you get with someone like me, who is like, oh, you tried to sweep that under the rug, what else is under there? What else is under there? Because we don't want you tripping and stumbling over that heavy, the heavy stuff that you can put up under that rug. So let's pull it out. If you get with someone like me who is always going to challenge you to be better and challenge you to go deeper, um, that can be a very tough situation because it is causing you to flex and exercise muscles that maybe you didn't know were there in some cases, or maybe some that you have not worked in a very long time. And we know how it is, ladies, gentlemen, and they, them, when we haven't worked out in a long time. Now, I'm talking about it in a physical way. When we haven't worked out in a while and we try to get back into it, it's a little hard. It's kind of hard at first. And then when you finally get through it, it doesn't feel good the first few times. But after a while, the repetition of said muscle makes it easier for you to move forward in your journey. And mentally and emotionally, it is the same thing. It is the same thing. And if your partner wants better for you over time, just like some trainers in fitness, you know what I mean, or advisors or whatever, coaches, oh, you will push back in the beginning, and that is to be expected. But over time, you will do that less and less. And I think once, like most of us, once we trust the person that is in front of us, advising us and pushing us, once we trust them, it becomes this beautiful synergy when bonding, when that bond is forged, and you're like, this is my soft place to land, this is my safe space, and I know I can come in here and get a hug, I can get a pat on the back, or I can get a whack upside the head. That's what I tell people. That is the type of person I am. I can give you a hug, I can give you a pat on the back, or a whack upside the head. All can be effective depending on the person, the place and the timing of it all. Hey, so all of it works. But what I will say is particularly with men, trust and peace are two things that I think across the board most men struggle with. I think that is a thing that most men, and I will say black men particularly, because that's been my experience. I think it's the thing that most of us struggle with. Because in a world where you seldomly deal with things, and I'll say that a million times, we're so used to swallowing our softer emotions, swallowing our tears, swallowing frustration, the vulnerability, swallowing those. I think in a world where we have been taught that we need to do that and we need to just power through, it gets very, very tough at that moment when it's like, you're not finna just swallow that. Let's see how we can work through that. It can be very, very daunting, but I think it's the beauty is the other side of it. When you find peace and you find safety in the hearts and in the minds of the person that you've trusted. That is the beauty in it. When a person that maybe was resistant at one point and maybe was guarded at the beginning and maybe did not know they could open up and have these moments, these soft moments where they're laughing and they're giggly, you know what I mean, and they're looking at you and biting the side of their lip like little school kids. um Sometimes, our men don't realize that there's a space for that, and in a space where everything is sassy, zesty, and oh, that's not masculine enough. Oh, that's not a real man to just be goofy for a little bit, or to just be like, yo, like, I'm so tired today. Like, can I just lay on your chest? Can I just can you just can I just snuggle up on you or whatever? You be the big spoon today or whatever that looks like. You got to create a space for that because it's an unnatural feeling for a lot of our men. And my goal is to be that safe space, that soft place to land, that trust, that peace. My goal is to be that for my partner because he deserves it and we deserve it. And I think when your partner, if it's your man or whoever it may be, but when your partner feels safe and secure and able to be 100% themselves without judgment, not without critique now, because we're always interested in making each other better, but you look forward to those moments. Once you have that trust and safety, you look at you're looking to them to be like, yo, like, hey, what you think about this? And where before they would just fail their way through it, now they're asking for it. They're like, yo, babe, like, tell me this or whatever. Like, okay, am I right or am I wrong? That level of security in relationship, but in self is super super important. And I feel like when that happens, and I'll say it a million times, when he's happy, he goes out into the world and makes other people happy. And when he's safe, he goes out into the world and wants to make everybody else safe and productive and just wants everybody else to feel just as whole as he is on the inside. And that is, I believe that is synonymous with whatever type of partner you have. But just from my experience, I think our men need that. I want my man to come home and be goofy one day. I want to come home and just be as goofy as he want to be. Even if he don't twerk, I want him to come in and be like, yo, I watched this TikTok and I want to see his little stiff twerk so I can crack up laughing like, boy, now you know if you don't get your tail up, making us look bad, but you get an E for effort with your little cute self. I want to have that kind of rapport. I want when my man comes in from a hard days of work and I know he just wore out, I could be like, come on. Go on, put your head in my bosom. And he just laughed at me because he's like, yo, why do you keep calling it a bosom? I said, well, that ain't stopped you from laying in here. So get on in there now. Get on in here and snuggle your face in there or whatever, and then start kissing me and stuff like that. And then, well, y'all know what could happen. We just gonna have dinner and dessert, okay? A couple times, but I want there to be just such a safe space for that. I want my men to get excited about working like, yo, let me tell you, like the weirdest thing just happened. Or like, yo, I saw this chick, this dude up in here, them motherfuckers was crazy. Like when men are happy, safe, and secure, I love when you get to see all of those sides. You know what I mean? You get to see them go from being hard and tough all the time to being soft. And it's so funny to see. Yeah, I saw this teddy bear and stuff. And like, it's I just thought I would get it for you and stuff like that. It's just it's such a beautiful thing to see them try to tap into that when and if that's not the normal personality. So I give all of these examples and I have all of this excitement in it because it just shows and it depicts the level of openness that has happened and the level of growth that is unraveling in real time, and you just can't help but to admire it whatever it looks like. You be like, Lord Jesus, this man done put on, just silly things, just small things. Like he never cooked with an apron, but now he cooking with your apron on and stuff like that, and it just looks so cute and funny. And he over there having a good time singing your songs while he in there trying to cook some. It's just all those beautiful moments, that safety, security, mentally. You know what I mean? In the person, it opens up the world to so many things. I think it also works in the self accountability and in turn, the couple's accountability when something does not go right, you know, when something doesn't go right or as planned, and he needs to tell you like, yo, I did something, I'm not proud of it, or yo, I found myself, in this situation and I know better. I think it heightens that level of self accountability, number one, but also the accountability in knowing that what happens to the one of us happens for the both of us, and that I better tell you about it because you may be my better half, or you should be my better half, and I know you're gonna have my back through it or whatever. And I'm already, and the interesting thing about that is that that level of accountability to the relationship typically will have the person beating themselves up. And even in those situations, I kind of look at it, and I enjoy the beauty in it. I'm like, you love us enough that you are really over here taking yourself through it, because the last thing you want to do is interrupt our peace and our happiness over here. But that even though it's tough, it's something that we're going to have to work through together. And you would, rather be honest with me. And I think there's some beautiful things that happen in that too, in where you get to also reinforce trust and reinforce peace. I see a lot of couples that'll argue and they'll, tear each other down, and they seem so miserable. And it's such an anxiety ridden relationship, because you make one false move, and and the person is like, oh my god. I don't want that for me and mine. I want mine to be able to say, listen, babe, I made a mistake today, and I already feel awful, and and then I come over here and say, hey, come here, get over here, and get over here. Let me hold you real quick. And then I'm like, all right, tell me what happened. And then this is how we're going to work through it. And I know that embrace makes, I shouldn't say every man, but having that embrace makes most men feel comfortable, because we all need it. I need it too sometimes. There's sometimes where I'm just like, I need a hug. And I don't mean just a hug from anybody. I need a hug from somebody that I really feels like cares. And I mean cares in a very deep and meaningful way, outside of my regular um friendships, or peerships and all those things. It's a different type of thing when it's somebody that you are romantic with and intimate with, that you just are like, I just need that. The energy that comes from it, the embracing that comes from it, is just very different. And so, as I said at the beginning of this conversation, you have to learn, in some instances, how to learn. And that means, what does that look like? What does it feel like? What is learning in action? Right? And then also learning what growth looks like, and learning how to grow, knowing that it is going to cause some mental bumps and bruises, and there is going to be a moment where you have to say, I need a moment. And there's also going to be moments where it's like, yo, I need you. And you're going to be there to support in the journey. But it doesn't just happen. It doesn't just happen. You have to go into your relationship willing and open to do that work. And I would implore all of us that if we are working through something new with someone, a new situationship, relationship, whatever, that as we walk into it with the spirit of wanting to get to know and understand, what makes that person tick, what makes them talk, what are their innermost fears, and how do we as a unit, if we're doing the same thing, how do we as a unit help each other elevate from it? So I hope that you all have learned something from this particular conversation. Maybe it has caused you to look at growing in some way, shape, or form. And maybe this just touched on something that you felt for a while but couldn't put words to. But my hope is that we all move into new spaces and new people with the spirit of openness, and leaving the defensiveness behind. And we just focus on how we can align with each other, be better to each other, for each other, with each other. All right, y'all. This has been the Michael Experience. Thank you all so much for listening. And as I say, go on out there and love on yourself first before you can love on somebody else. All right. Until next time, y'all have a good one. Peace and love. Bye.